unpredictability of Lexer's behavior. Listener discretion is advised. The VOT Network presents the Voices of Terminus Show with your hosts, Yarnilla, Lexer, and Joshua.
Graphics gremlins. Good way to start the show.
To the Voice of Terminus show. I see that I have an N missing in innate. I do apologise. It wasn't intentional. I just missed an N.
Cultural differences. People get over it.
So today's topic is going to be a closer look at racial innates. Before I introduce everybody that is here today, I want to quickly fly over what happened last week within the community and with VR, and then see what's coming up. So last week, as we all know, on Wednesday, the first video newsletter was put out by VR, where they talked about the racial innates, the Spriggan, and questions. Then a day after that, Pantheon Plus had a review look at new newsletter format and talked a bit about that, and talked about the innates themselves, what they liked, what they disliked, so forth. And then Baskin put out 2 videos on the 24th as well, where he did kind of like a reaction viewing first, on the new newsletter format with people stream, and then he went in depth with the burning questions, answering the burning questions, basically giving some insight as to where these questions come from. That was some people were wondering where these questions came from. And then what we can look forward to is VR hosting a stream with Code Carnage, where they show us some of the progress, some of the work that they've been doing. They're not going to be doing any gameplay or anything like that. I think it's going to be something similar to the a making of a city that they did about a year ago with Thronefast, where they showed off Thronefast. Co will be joining VR to have a look at that. And that's what we can all look forward to. I do not know if Minus or Pantheon Plus will be doing a show on the 31st, since it is Halloween. So if you're there, Minus, and you are doing a show, you can then also confirm that. Otherwise, I didn't leave you out intentionally. I wasn't quite sure. So,
I'm just going to say one thing. You need to change the title.
Yeah.
On the stream.
It should be changed.
It's not.
I'm seeing the player Q&A, 168.
I've just changed it basically, but it's not going to update now anyway. It will only update when I go off there, so we'll leave it. But it has been changed. Anyway, I have with me Josh as usual. Say hello, Josh.
Hey guys.
We have Lex with us. Say hello, Lex.
Yay.
Yay, so enthusiastic. In the background, as always, Shy, looking after chat and looking after us and keeping us in check. We don't deviate too much. And today's special guest is Evo. Hey, buddy.
Hi, guys.
Yay, Evo!
So we brought on Evo for this because we all know Evo. Evoras has a reputation for crunching numbers and digging deep into, putting it all together so that we can all understand it. His brain functions differently than most of ours does, so we thought.
Hey, I resent that remark just because my brain doesn't function.
So let's have a look at the general innates. So before we get into them individually, it's going to be hard to read them, but here we go. There's a lot of.
I guess we'll just have to get someone with a sexy voice to read them.
So that's basically the innates, the Archai.
Holy hell, that's a wall attack.
Lots. So, and before we get into talking about innate, I want to bring up the disposition. That's something that was very interesting to see. So, apart from the alarmist, what they listed for each of these different races, there were a lot of new ones in.
Oh yeah.
We have True Sight, we have Playful, we have Mastermind, we have Deranged, Cunning, Avenging, Bloodthirsty, and Predatory. And those are all new, right?
I'm just going to make a little nerd joke here and say if I kill an NPC that has a True Sight disposition, do I get a bow?
And
if I kill somebody with an avenging one,
the ones
does that mean they're better?
Yeah, fiery.
the ones marked in yellow at the very bottom are the ones that we knew about that are on the Pantheon difference. So Bully, Craven, Opportunist, Protector, and Strategist. So they've definitely added a lot. Or my question is as well, could they have replaced some of these with more meaningful names? That's why they're marked in yellow. If that's not the case, this is really good. This is good to see that they have a lot of these dispositions. It definitely makes for an interesting engagement.
Yeah, it feels like they aren't. It just feels like they aren't overlapping them. I think those ones can stand on their own by the looks of it.
Yeah, even if they did replace or rename the ones that were existing, we still have four new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah.
Eva, what do you think about the
Well, I think they have replaced a few, renamed, I should say. And I do think they've included a few extras. And there are some, we can make a little bit of judgment on some of them as well. So if you look at something like True Sight, you can see that that's going to be something to look, to be able to see things like rogues sneaking. So that's the kind of thing that they're going to be building in, let's say, on your way to go to fight some boss monster.
Yeah.
Or a raid boss or something of that nature, because they're not going to want people to sneak through.
I also think those True Sight guys will target rogues specifically up front instead of before targeting anybody else. So I think that's what a True Sighter will do.
Yeah, I mean.
Now, if we had those intermingled with the general population of a dungeon, that's going to pose a lot of difficulties for people who, like, say, you're halfway into a dungeon, and one of your DPS leaves, and you get someone else. Well, typically, if you were to replace that with a rogue, they just sneak all the way to you, and then off you go.
And what we do know
you might not be able to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, this actually reminds me of going back to some people who played EverQuest 1. When you're looking at Guck and the dungeons of Guck in Lower Guck, there were undead ends, and then there were the living end. And to get through there, some of the mobs could see they could see undead, and some of them could see living. So you had to use invisibility to undead and invisibility to living, depending on which section you were running through. This has done that, but in spades. Yeah. You now have not just two things to worry about, but, well, a lot.
Now, what if there's actually subcategories for dispositions? What if there's True Sight Invis? What if there's True Sight, just different categories? I mean, we really...
Feign Death, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what if it's specifically for Feign Death?
Well, that's the thing with the dispositions. We do know that they do have a certain behavior, either towards a certain class, or towards a certain race, or towards a certain size, based on the size of you. We know, like, the bullies are going to basically provoke you, and sometimes it can go sideways for the NPC or go sideways for us. So that they all have different behavioral patterns as well, which also makes it intriguing and very interesting when you're engaging with these kind of counters. Like, an added layer of difficulty and challenge to it. If we look at the second one, Playful, that can mean anything. That could be somebody that like Evo. You mentioned this before we went on air. A NPC that doesn't abide by certain rules. Doesn't have a typical behavioral pattern. So it could be something that, like, for instance, when you train something, when you're getting trained by a bunch of mobs, they break after a certain period, or when they get to the zone or something like that. Maybe that Playful just sits there and goes on to the next person that's there, and doesn't start to walk back. And maybe he teases. You know, he runs towards you, then he runs back. He runs towards you, runs back, trying to lure you in to trap you.
If I was the guy doing the code for these dispositions, to me, playful would be a means for me to really mess with the player.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could have your typical group tank and spank kind of thing going on. All of a sudden, he just breaks off and runs away, and then he comes back, or maybe he just randomly drops threat.
The one I was focusing on actually was what I think replaced the strategist, which is the mastermind. I suspect that this is the one who is looking for the weak link or the most important point. Either the healer or the wizard, something that's easy to kill, and they are going to target them. So if you're not careful, either your healer or your wizard is just going to get completely nuked.
I hope so, that's actually what it is. And because the only other way that's coming to my mind right now is that it's just they charm, or maybe they have a pet. And I'm sitting there going, I mean, it fits, but at the same time, that's awfully lazy.
Yeah, Coach T says, after getting respawns and moving deeper in, you start encountering NPCs with the true side of cunning disposition, both of which you can see through feigned death. Suddenly you have a hard encounter that can require a different strategy. That was Joppa in Burning Questions. So, yeah, they have spoken about it to some degree.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if you remember back to an early stream where the actual players, their wizard got attacked by the opposing wizard and got like one-shotted.
Mm-hmm.
They actually targeted the wizard out of all the other people, and they weren't even high on the aggro list.
Yeah.
So that smacks to me of what was then the strategist, which presumably now could be the mastermind. So, yeah, you'll have to think about exactly how you're going to do that.
It's quite interesting, though. I just wanted to say one thing quickly before you continue. Is that does it work on a threat level basis, or does it work on? Say now you've got two mages in the group. How does it know which one to target first between those two mages? Work on the higher threat level per mage, or are they specifically building these dispositions per class in the game?
It's possible. Again, if this was me doing the coding for Mastermind, what I'd do is I'd look for the character that would have the lowest time to kill for this NPC, and that's who I would target. With obvious ways to counteract it, but we won't get into that. But that's how I would do it. It wouldn't be a specific class, because honestly, that's kind of lazy too. To just say, if there's a wizard, nuke him.
Well, let me quickly jump in on this, right? Because if we look, there are actually, so far that we know of, there's 14 dispositions. And we do know that there is in total going to be 14 classes post-launch.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They could have replaced some of these, but these could also play into each class as well.
Yeah.
So, that there is also that option out there that this could possibly be the 14 dispositions that, each class is going to kind of have a relationship.
There are hints that would sort of lend itself towards that. If you look at Bloodthirsty for Dire Lord, you look at perhaps, I don't know, Avenging for Paladin.
It could be a mastermind, could drain the mana of something.
Enchantment.
I mean, mastermind could be a summoner or an enchanter.
I do have this nagging fear of the disposition. I really do. And I'm praying to whatever dark gods are listening that this doesn't just end up being like the disposition is just another word for the class that the NPC is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say that's what it is, because I have no basis to say that. But it is a fear I have. If you're strapped for time, that'd be an easy way out.
Well, I mean, it could be let's say that's a starting point for them. that they'll build. You know, let's start there. Let's create a disposition that reflects each class, and then once we've done that, we've got it working, and we can prove it works. Now we'll start to build other dispositions that aren't necessarily class related, and we can stack those either with other dispositions or as extra dispositions.
Well, yeah, we do know though that, for instance, like the bully, for instance, is going to provoke. The alarmist is going to bugger off and call for help. The opportunist is going to basically see when we're at our weakest point or anything like that, or when we're in a critical situation. The opportunist is going to jump in. Protector's going to be the guy that basically jumps in front of everybody else and tries to, you know, save everybody. Strategist is going to, you know, think first, like, you know, who do I take out first? Like, who's the weakest link or who's the strongest link? Who do I need to take out? So there is that sense of that, you know, even though this might be the case that they are, you know, kind of designed first and foremost towards the individual classes, their behavior is still going to be representative of, you know, a typical mechanic that is going to be challenging and engaging for us regardless.
Even if, as you rightly say, even if they do represent these type of things, let's hope they are done in a clever and meaningful way that'll give a challenge to the players.
Let's just take the alarmist for instance, right? Who would the alarmist be as a class? What do you guys think, right? Just so I can bring up this example.
It's got to be.
I don't know. Actually,
that's an odd one.
That's the odd one for me as well.
We'll take Mastermind and go with Illu, right? Or Enchanter. Enchanter, for instance.
Enchanter,
right? You know, we don't know what the behavioural pattern's going to be. We don't know how it's going to react. You know, we don't know if it's going to have something to do with pets or charming or anything like that. So it's going to be very difficult to say because to kind of have that mirror effect, right? Bloodthirsty Dire Lord, for it. Not every Dire Lord's going to stand there and go, "Oh, I'm here for blood." Not every PC.
True. Not everyone's a good Dire Lord.
No, but that's what I'm getting at. So it's. While it might be a mirror effect to some point, the behaviour that the NPCs are going to have is still going to reflect differently on us. So we're not going to act the same way as those NPCs will engage with us. You know, like the alarmist. Let's take the ranger for instance, because he always gets the stick. All right, the ranger's the alarmist. He's the one who goes and buggers off and calls for help. Not going to happen.
I'm really hoping that what we do end up seeing.
Alarmist, ranger.
Yeah. Ah, there's a slavery. Oh my god!
I have to fight.
What I want to see, what we may not see, but what I want to see is I want to see warrior NPCs that can be a mastermind, or that can be crusade, or can be an alarmist. You know, rather than just say like, oh, every monk has a chance to either be deranged, avenging, or an alarmist.
Yeah. I hope that they do randomly go through it as well. That, you know, every NPC out there varies in their disposition. So not every wizard is going to have the same disposition or the same 2-3 dispositions. So that it varies every time. So you think, because that's the thing, once you get to know all these dispositions, and there's 14 of them at this time, once you've gone through these dungeons or through the zone and you've gone through these encounters time and again, after, you know, going through it 4, 5, 6, 7 times, you get the gist of, you know, hey, you know, these oh, look, this group spawned, so they're going to have this disposition. I hope that's not going to be the case so much. I hope it's going to be one of those situations where you walk in there, you think you know, and then, surprise!
Well, I hope that the bosses themselves can have multiple dispositions. So, and they can be changed every time you go into the dungeons. So you might have true sight and playful on the one boss, and then the next time you go in, you'll have cunning and avenging type of thing.
Well, they have hinted already that mobs can spawn with differing dispositions.
Yeah.
So that if you go through one area, you know, this time, the first time you go through it may be Craven, the second time you go through, it might be an alarmist. And therefore you're going to have to, you can't just sort of say, oh, it's always the same, I can just camp this for 10 hours. because each time you do it, it could be different or will be different. I would even like to see them vary the intensity of them.
Yeah.
So
I was just thinking that.
So the alarmist might run when he gets to 50% health, or 40, or 30, or depending on how strong. And the Craven, if he's really Craven, scores 9 on the Craven meter. He may run when he loses just 10% health.
Yeah.
You pull him and he just runs.
I mean, the dispositions add that other layer to it. So when we're engaging in combat, when we all remember raiding, going through dungeons where you had like an account of 4 or 5 NPCs, and you always had to, the best way to do it was to take out, the healer first, because the healer would always, heal the group up. This adds another layer to it as well. This is going to make you think twice. Do we take out the healer first, or do we take out this disposition first? Because that might play into effect. It's going to add another layer of us, strategically picking and choosing what to take down first. Do we take down the class itself, or do we, react to the disposition first? Because that could cause us other problems. Concentrating on the healer, and then the alarmist goes and buggers off and brings help. But if we were taking out the alarmist first, or try to take him out, that might, give us a better outcome. So that definitely adds another layer. I really do like, the whole approach of dispositions, and I hope that they do add, a lot of variance to it. You guys want to guess on any of these? Like, how do you see avenging playing out? When do you see that coming into effect? Because for me,
as soon as it sees one of the
relates to death for me.
When it sees one of its buddies dropping to the ground,
does it
rage? Power up, rages and starts attacking you.
Whoever lands the killing blow now has that NPC's threat.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, if I was going to do avenging, as soon as one of its buddies died, and it might have to be a specific buddy, it gets enraged, extra damage, extra strength. It'll go for the person that did it, and they will leap up the taunt table, its hate table, by a far more than it should have. As if it, in other words, all the damage it did to kill that mate, it gets on its hate table straight away. Yeah. So it's going to stick to you like glue until your tank can get it off.
And bloodthirsty sounds to me like it's something like that could end up having a lot of random attacks. So it's not necessarily going to be focused on some singular target. It's gonna bounce between the targets. It could also have some kind of additional AE effect, because it just screams like beating the shit out of everybody.
Well, I think that once it sees either its own ally dropping to the ground, blood, or seeing one of their PCs dropping to the ground dead, it'll enhance its attack powers and speed as well. So it actually just starts going, it rages basically even further and harder and starts hitting harder.
It could be enraged, they could get a heal, they could get a haste.
Well, I was going to say, it could actually get a buff the more damage it does.
Yeah. And then we have the other interesting one as well is predatory, right? If we think about predators in general, how the predator beings in nature in the world react.
Well, the Predator movie just springs to mind immediately. So you've got some invis mob stalking you throughout the dungeon. Attack when you weakest, basically.
All I get in my head now is Danny Glover saying that one line, and everybody knows it, and I can't say it because we're PG.
Go for it, go for it.
No.
Well, we can only hope that predatory means predatory as in carnivorous animals. In other words, they will always go for the weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
So they will always go for the the small wildebeest. The one that's away from the rest of the pack. But so they will go for the smallest, the halfling, or it could just be the weakest.
It could also be that they that predatory is in packs as well. So the predatory one could be related to groups.
Honestly, I think Evo is really onto something here with predatory, but technically could that just be a rename of opportunist? Because it's kind of the same thing. Or it's very, very similar.
I can't remember what they said the opportunist was going to do.
As far as I remember, the opportunist basically seeks out the best the best opportunity to
or maybe it creates opportunity. Maybe
so they are very similar.
Maybe chat can help us out.
For some reason, I've got this picture in my head now. I've got all the dispositions on a wall, and you've got all these strings connecting dots and stuff. It's just a mess. But that's a good thing.
Well,
the less I can predict, the better.
Difficult. Rushing in without a plan is going to be a disaster.
Yes. So, Yarn, we're going to have fun. I'm going to get us killed. How bad can it be? Oh, God, save me!
Coach T says the opportunist was the one that was nuking the caster. Remember that one fight where casters kept getting targeted by nuke?
Mm-hmm.
That was so early, though. You could kind of attribute that to possibly a bug. Maybe it was going off too much.
Maybe it's intentional.
Or it's intentional. We don't know, really.
So there's definitely, a lot of room for this, and I do hope that some dispositions also track over to what I said a minute ago with the predatory, that they add dispositions that are group related as well. Like predatory, you could put that into a group of 3 where they come from all sides and
or they get buffs for that group that they're in already, so they start off stronger when they attack you.
I mean, I'd like to see wolves, for example, using pack maneuvers. So they might have a pack disposition where they will attack in groups so that they can make sure that one of them is always flanking you or behind you for extra bonus.
Wolves and badgers, I agree.
I like what you talked about as well with being in dungeons, engaging with named encounters. This goes for raids as well. I do hope that named NPCs, and I mean, maybe they've already said it, I don't know, it's been a long time, but I do hope that named encounters and raid mobs have multiple dispositions during a fight, or that the encounters that they bring up always have different dispositions when they have ads come in. Go on, Lex.
Maybe dispositions change during different phases.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was getting at. That's where I was heading. So you start off true sight 20, at 100%. He's got true sight, and then at 70%, he switches over to deranged or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say he starts playful, and then after 30, then after 50% health, he goes to deranged, and then when he gets down to 10%, he goes alarmist. He runs off.
He just runs out of the room, and you're stuck inside.
That could be one of those situations where you don't have enough DPS going.
That's right.
Goodbye.
I'm going to call my big brother.
I'll be like, oh my God, someone snare him, please.
Let's go and talk a little bit about the Archai. Josh, do you want to go and bring us up to speed with the Archai innate racial?
No problem. Yeah. So the Archai starts off with a living reservoir. The mana drain effects are reduced by X percentage. They're effervescent as well, immune to effects that drain endurance, which is good. Elemental attunement grants a bonus to the effectiveness of elemental-based abilities based on attunement to fire, water, wind, and earth. And natural acclamation. Innate bonus to acclamation score based on elemental attunement. Fire scorching, water frigid, wind shear, and earth toxic. Finally, Archai will have an advantage against the playful disposition. I don't see the Archai being playful, but anyway.
Well, they are made out of clay, so Play-Doh.
Well, it doesn't actually say that they are playful. It says that they have an advantage against playful.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so. we did discuss it earlier as well. But anyway, we'll discuss that later.
Yeah, so we'll look at this. So I wanted to ask you guys, after hearing about the Archai's Racial Innates passive ones, what were your initial thoughts? What were your first thoughts? And we'll start with you, Lex.
Elemental Attunement, we called that shit, baby.
Yes, we did.
Go check out our older archive video, because I swear to God, the minute I saw it, I was like, ha! Nice, we actually got something right. How about that? Let's go through them one by one. Living Reservoir, the mana drain effect reduction. That's great. Like, if you're any kind of healer, that's going to be massive for you.
Mm.
The effervescence immunity to drain effects is going to be huge for monks or any kind of melee type that use endurance. The elemental attunement and the natural acclimation go hand in hand, which, yes, it is a bonus to the in-game, but to me it feels like it's just icing on the cake. You know, it really helps immerse and sell what this race is. And honestly, I'm not going to be playing an archive, but I really appreciate the passives that they have.
Mm-hmm. And what are your initial thoughts, Evo?
Well, I actually focus straight on the elemental attunement, because it seems to me that what they're hinting at is that because they get a bonus to the effectiveness of whichever element they choose, it means that when you create an Archai, it's going to ask you, which element are you attuning to?
I think Joppa mentioned that.
Yeah. So what color is your skin, or the
glow, I guess.
Glow, that you have will be representative of which attunement you have chosen, and presumably then you'll be more effective. And that means if you want a wizard, presumably you're going to pick fire, or whichever the other one that they could do. Is it wind? I can't remember. I think water was shaman, something like that.
I believe so, yeah.
Maybe earth was druid. I can't remember. Can they be druids? Yes, they can.
Yeah, they can, yeah.
So it's sort of saying that there's a big bonus in there if you're playing an Archai caster. Yeah. And that sort of fits in with the mana drain. The drain endurance, normally that would be a melee type person. But it looks to me, if I were playing an Archai, I'd be thinking I'm playing something like a shaman.
Yeah, the way I look at it, to quickly just bounce off what you just said there, like a monk, for instance, could basically use all four of these attunements, because a monk is all about the spiritual balance, and all the elements anyway, so fire, water, wind, earth. So that basically relates to a monk through and through. Druid, like you said, earth. We know that they are nature driven, so earth would be it would be their beneficial attunement. It's not to say that we can't have a fire druid or something like that has some bonuses or not. But the shaman as well, like you said, water based. The warrior I could see using all of these as well again. And then you have the wizard, which you could relate to either wind or fire or water, with lightning and earth even. So it's while you're it does seem that they are going for selective choice here. If you break it down to how we view monks in real life, and all the fiction that's out there, books, movies, etc., you can kind of attune it to all of them. So they all have some kind of functionality with these atonements. So, Josh, I left you out last because you plan on playing an Arc.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about your Racial Innate passive?
I think the monk itself will have some benefit to it, but I think that most benefit for the Archai will be linked to the druid and the shaman, and wizard itself, any caster around the Archai, simply because I think that the mana drain effects, as well as the various elemental attunements, is going to benefit those casting classes. So I think I think they are fairly solid, the Archai, when they to choose any one of those classes.
Yeah.
Nice and solid.
What if, like, say for a monk, we know there's a good chance we're gonna have like maybe there's like elemental strikes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you had like say like a fire punch, if you were attuned to fire, that would do more damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And whereas if you had like say a more defensive one that was based on earth and you were earth attuned, maybe that's got a bonus.
Well, that's the thing. If you can, and I'm not saying it's possible, but if it is possible that you can choose the element of damage that a monk could do up front, then I think that makes a hell of a lot of sense. That whatever acclamation you choose,
that would be interesting. I mean, you would basically say like all of your attacks have a base of, let's say, earth damage.
Yeah.
Rather than just doing the typical like EverQuest white damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, if we actually look at the monk skills that they showed us in one of the newsletters in 2018, you've got some of the abilities that they named, things like Strike of the Wandering Wind, Carter of the Flickering Flame, you've got Kick of the Raging Gale, and Mountain Pose. So it's possible. It's possible then that if you choose Earth, the abilities that are reflected in that will get a bonus. They're more effective. Maybe they last longer. Whatever it happens to be.
Wind speeds up that ability.
Yeah. And the same, for example, for the shaman. I think one of their spells is a stone-based spell that gives you better armor or strength or something like that. And so that one may be more powerful.
And it's the same with the warrior. If you look at the banners, for instance, maybe the banners for an Archai have some elemental attunement. Maybe that's maybe something specific for the Archai. That their banners reflect one of the 4 different attunements.
So it does look like the Archai get a choice of which sphere that they want to have an advantage on.
And it kind of, mixes it up as well. If we get to them, I don't know if we're going to make it today. We'll have to see. But the elves, for instance, we already know that the elves are going to have 2 different factions, at least to start off with. Right? And that's the only class or the only race so far that we know that officially has 2 different factions when starting off. And they basically, have their normal elf passives, racial innate passives that go for all of them, for both factions, and then they have their faction specific one. This could be another means of how they're kind of trying to spice it up by giving the Archai not necessarily different factions, but based on their element that they choose or their life force that they choose, fire, water, wind, and earth, is their way of branching them out, breaking them apart. I
mean, at the very least, it means that you've broken the cookie cutter mold from day one. So you're really hope at level 6, and you've got 2 Archai. One has got earth, one has got wind. They're not going to perform the same.
I know there's a lot of those super creative guys out there, or guys in a more general term. For the love of God, don't attack me. That are into like that machinima stuff, being able to make it, which is awesome, by the way. I really want to see someone do a little skit with some Archai characters of a band called Fire, Water, Wind, and Earth. Come on, someone make it happen, please.
Oh, so good.
The 1970s are back.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So Josh, or guys in general, do you have any other thoughts to this? Anything you want to add? Anything you want to talk about?
Just based on the warrior and monk, their abilities, I can't rightly remember, but are they based on endurance drain? Are they based on endurance? So the higher your endurance, the more attacks you can do, or special attacks you can do. Because the effervescent is probably the only one that, for me, sticks out as like, not the most the greatest thing. Let's put it that way.
It depends. It depends on how bad or how frequently those effects happen in the world. If it's something that isn't all that often, like say you're a monk that uses endurance, or maybe they're not very strong, it's one of those things where maybe you don't even notice. But if these effects are kind of like you get hit, and if you don't resist, all of your endurance is gone, and all of a sudden you can't do special attacks.
That's exactly my thought.
That immunity is going to become huge.
That's exactly my thought.
Yeah.
Either it can be the best thing to take, or it can be just a nothing thing.
As far as I remember, the warrior is based off of it. So it's definitely going to be critical to him. And I think that the monk was a mix of mana and endurance, if I remember correctly. Maybe chat can help us out here. But I'm pretty sure that this is split between the druid, the wizard, and the shaman with the living reservoir, and then the monk and the warrior with the other with the endurance. So. Yeah.
All in all, Archai has pretty good passes because there's something for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's two things that work for you no matter what class you choose.
True.
And it will be interesting to see, the elemental attunement, how that's going to work. Can each class, choose on their own which element they want to take, and that basically adds another flavor, another layer to the whole approach. Because how would this be different, having a fire druid against a wind druid or earth druid, for it, and so forth, or with the shaman, for instance, one that's focused on water, then you take one that has is focused on earth. How they're going to play differently, and how they can kind of work together and work within a group as well. What kind of effect is that going to have on the group?
Well, I was going to say the good news takeaway from this is, first of all, we've explicitly been given 2 elves, not 1. So we've got 1 extra one. And then with the Archai, it seems that what we really do have is 4 Archai, not 1.
Yes.
So we've actually gained 4 extra classes, if you will, or sort of specializations for 2 sets of classes already.
And this is also a great time sink as well for VR, because those those min-maxers out there are going to want to try it all out. They're going to create each and every single one of these for their desired class that they want to choose, and see how they're going to play out, how they're going to be effective within a group, and so forth and so forth. So it's definitely a cool time sink that they brought in, huh?
I wouldn't go that far. I'd say they just crunch the numbers, because that's all I'm going to do for my first all.
Numbers aren't everything, buddy.
They're not, but they help someone who's not very skilled like me.
I just hope that after 2-3 expansions down the line, that these type of things are still relevant to gameplay. Yeah. That's my only worry and concern about these type of things, the importance of them at this point.
All right.
Yeah, that was the thing with EverQuest 1. I mean, once you hit end game, your racials really didn't matter at all.
Yep.
Exactly.
So let's go and have a look at the Darkmere, Josh.
All right. So, come on, Darkmere. Where are you? There we go. Right. So the Darkmere. The first one is Vestige of Sirenai. Grants underwater breathing and increased swim speed. Perceptive. Increases insight skill by 10 points. Embittered Psyche. Increases both stealth effectiveness and awareness by 10 points. And finally, Born of Deep Waters. Grants an innate bonus to anaerobic and pressure acclimation. And the Darkmere will have an advantage against the cunning disposition.
That's the Darkmere, and there's quite a few choices of classes in the place. So we'll start with Evo this time. Evo, what are your first thoughts on the Darkmere?
I mean, when I first looked at it, the thing that sort of grabbed me was, rogue, really. it seemed to me that this, even before I'd looked at all the possible classes that you could play as a Dark Myr, Rogue sort of hit me just by the obvious, the increase in stealth. That's big. For all the min-maxers out there, that's what they're going to latch onto. They're going to see this and they're going to say, hey, we can get a bonus here, and it'll work all the way to end game. And the same for insight. It'll work all the way to end game. When you sort of stop then and look a bit closer, then you start to think, well, what else do I get? And there are actually some things that could be very useful. Mostly situational, and a lot of it's RP. If you're looking at, they're an evil race, I think they're an evil race.
Evil-ish.
Evil-ish.
There's no scar, but
there is basically a.
I mean, how evil is a tadpole? How evil is a goldfish?
Well, there is a second faction in the lore. Basically, the dreaded Myr. Myr is basically the evil, the real evil of the fish folk.
Dread Myr.
I was gonna say I haven't met very many evil fish sticks in my life.
But by and large, I think a lot of the ones that you can see, the passives, are what I would class as situational. The underwater breathing, the increased swim speed. I mean, if their starting town is underwater, that's great. But the anaerobic and pressure you'll find, but primarily underwater. So they will be great underwater, seriously great. Underwater dungeons, fantastic. But that doesn't lend itself specifically to one class. So I think that's a bit of choose your class. If you want to play Dark Myr, you're playing it for its RP properties. Unless possibly, the stealth and awareness and the insight help you, perhaps for probably a rogue, maybe for a dire lord, depending on how it works. That would be a guess, anyway.
So we'll jump over to you, Lex.
Well, the Dark Myr. Sorry, I'm not saying Myr because you don't spell Myr with a Y. Otherwise, we'd be living in the Ur.
I was going to say, if you had an H and two R's.
Otherwise, we'd be living in the Ur 2019. Anyway.
Oh, some do say Ur.
Whatever, and those people need to go to speech therapy.
Yeah, just look at some regions in the UK.
Yeah. Well, Coach brings up a good point. Look at Myrmidon. Look at Myrmidon. MYR, Myrmidon. Okay. Done. Over with. Okay. While they don't get any substantial combat benefits for their passes, well, here's the thing. Theoretically, they do. Let's look at their underwater breathing. I'm going to use EverQuest because that's just the best example that I have to use. Every character either had to have a spell, they had to have an item equipped that gave you enduring breath, so you could breathe underwater. So typically, those items had very low, very just stats. So if you did not have innate water breathing, you would be losing those stats. So theoretically, if we assume, yes, I know I'm assuming here, that the same trend follows forward in Pantheon, which it's possible, then that
assuming it's breath form.
Sure. But that inability or the not needing to have a spell equipped gives you an extra spell slot. That's valuable. We know because there's limited real estate. Not having to equip an item with enduring breath gives you additional stats over the competition when in water. So I do see those situational as a bit of a combat bonus. Insight. Well, okay, I'm going to give that one to RP for sure. The Embittered Psyche with the stealth stuff, I that's going to be big in PvP if we do have any substantial PvP. I mean, that's going to be huge. It could potentially be even good for, say, a Dire Lord Dark Mirror, because you'll be able to detect stealthers from possibly farther away. That's great. You can target them before they backstab you or something. And the bonuses to the acclamation are just going to be good all the way around, because I have a feeling that those two in particular, anaerobic and pressure, are probably going to be two of the gigantic pains in the rear for anybody who is not a Dark Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So, Josh, what about you? Before I jump
my first thought is that this is the first slip up by them focusing too much on the actual class itself. Sorry, the race itself, in the sense that they are fish people, therefore we must focus everything on breathing underneath the water or anything water-based, and therefore have not made anything very ultimately beneficial that somebody, hey, I want to choose the Dark Mirror because it's got X, Y, and Z. And I think this is the first class that they've slipped up. I feel they're going to have to go back to the drawing board with one or two of these things. I mean, you're born of the waters deep waters with your anaerobic and pressure acclamations are great. I find that everything else is a bit meh compared to a lot of the other races that are out there.
Okay. So here's my take, everybody. You ready?
And that's it for the show. Good night.
So, the underwater breathing, like Lex has pointed out, and obviously the faster swimming, it screams Dark Mirror. It's definitely going to be beneficial when it comes to engaging with water. And yes, while you're right, Evo, that might be situational. We don't know what kind of zones and effects are going to happen, and if boat travel is going to be dangerous. I mean, I don't mind, traveling on a boat and then we get attacked by an octopus, the boat gets broken in half, everybody's like falling in the water and getting dragged down, and I'm like swimming around going, what's your problem? No, I'm going to survive. I'm a survivor. Joking aside.
I will survive.
That is, the insight, like Lex said, definitely is going to be interesting to a lot of people that are interested in the perception and looking at, that kind of thing. It's going to definitely be beneficial, like you said earlier on, Evo, before we went live. Beginning stages, but also towards the end stages with insight. Having that little extra bonus to gain that little advantage is definitely going to be there. But I definitely see the stealth, awareness, and effectiveness actually being beneficial to every single class that the Myr has to offer. Being able to see stealth, who would say no to that, right? And the effectiveness as well. While that might relate to a rogue specifically, who's not to say that for some reason the Myr can move closer to an encounter, or it basically aggros. That being the effectiveness stealth. So it's not seen from stealth encounters as quickly as other races out there.
Well, you do make a good point, and I think actually that if you are looking for where they are going to get a big benefit, it's not a class, but a role.
Yeah.
Pullers.
Yep.
If I were a puller, I would want awareness, and I would want stealth effectiveness. Maybe even insight, so I can see dispositions and things like that. And I'm thinking monk. I'm thinking rogue. I'm thinking who the guys that get to do pulling. Maybe even a Dire Lord if they're acting as puller. But those are pulling skills that are useful.
Yeah.
And it's also, situational system where situations come in, and then also add in the dispositions as well. We take the dispositions into effect that the NPCs might have. That stealthy awareness and effectiveness might play a big role in that. And that is something that, you know, any of the classes technically could, you know, would be happy to have. You know, if you know, because I'm typically an active cleric, meaning I'll sit behind the scenes looking after my group, but I'm always looking around, seeing what the hell's going on around me, going on around the group. So me having that little, you know, awareness, that stealth awareness and effectiveness might, you know, play out to us in a positive way. You know, even though this, you know, like you said, it is more role specific. Quite a few of these classes will have some benefits with all of this. Over and all, you know, these are the passives. We still have to look at the actives. We have to look at the stats as well, how that's going to play out. So I'm gonna say, all in all, I'm fairly happy where the Dark Myr are right now with the passive. So I'm good with that.
Possibly the only thing they missed was some kind of water affinity. They could have thrown that, you know, in the same way that Archai can choose fire affinity, water affinity, and etc. Well, Dark Myr perhaps should have been given lesser water affinity.
Yeah.
Less, you know, so not huge because they just get it. It's not like a choice between water and earth or anything like that. So, but give it to them. And then that would be a bonus for druids. That would be a bonus for summoners. That would be a bonus for wizards. Maybe monks.
You do actually bring out a good point there as well, because when we think about it, there are technically two versions to the Dark Myr. There's the water one and there's the land one. You know, we were given one lung. We have one lung to breathe. We were given legs, but we see on the website, and we hear everywhere whispers about the fin. Are the Myr going to have the fin in the water? So can we switch between having our legs and having a fin when we're in water? So they could have added some additional elements to that side of the passives, looking at the land version of the fish folk and the sea version of them. So I think, yeah, I mean, and they can always add in stuff as well. And obviously this is the first pass and the first actual information that we've gotten, so we still have to look at all the actives that we're getting, the stats and everything, and we have to all play it out first as well and see how it feels, how it works. But anyway, let's move on to the dwarves, and I think after the dwarves we're going to call it. So this basically means this will become a multi-part series. I don't know when we'll catch on with this. It could be a couple of weeks before we pick up the second show, but we'll definitely put this into a second, third video series. So Josh, would you bring us to the Blue Men group?
No problem. So the dwarfs. The fortitude is the first one. Dwarves gain extra hit points from each point of stamina. Grip of the Dwarven Father grants immunity to disarm. Ice and Stone, innate bonus to cold resistance, frigid and toxic acclimation. I always get that wrong. And Mountain Forged increases blunt weaponry skills by 10 points. Dwarves will have an advantage against the Avenging Disposition.
So, I'm going to throw this at the nodding head Lexa.
Honestly, they're very, very strong passive, every one of them. Fortitude, we don't have an exact number or anything that we can test with, so we don't know how much extra hit points they get for each point of stamina. It could be, you know, a fraction of a point. We don't know. So how crazy that gets, don't know. I'm going to say from the sounds of it, it sounds incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Because there's also questions of, does it stack with gear? Is it just your base stamina? Does it go up with levels? We don't know.
Exactly.
And obviously for a paladin or a warrior, that hit points are a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And it could give them quite an edge over the competition. Immunity to disarm, in my opinion, that's more of a PvP thing, because if you are disarmed, you're basically, depending on how they handle it. So I'll go with the WoW version, where you just end up slapping the thing until it's over and you have your weapon again. Not a big deal. You can still use your abilities, I'm going to assume here, again, because you don't really need a weapon to taunt somebody. The Ice and Stone, now they have bonuses against three acclamation types.
I think it's only. I think I'm going to go out on the limb here and say it's only 2. Frigid
I'm
and toxic.
I'm looking at it
Frigid
right
and
now, and I'm
cold.
like,
Frigid
frigid
and
and cold is kind of the same thing, but yeah,
Mm.
that I'm going to say that's a typo, and then it's only 2.
Yeah.
Still pretty strong, because we already know that that's going to be a big deal in.
Toxic is major. Yeah.
The hell
But
is that?
but it's a resistance though, and it's not immunity. So yeah.
Right. Again, I have to wait for the numbers to figure out how strong that is. And then, of course, your blunt weaponry skill increased by 10 points. Well, we don't really know exactly what weapon skill does. I think there's been hints of it allowing you to be more effective with a higher level weapon than what you could usually wield. It's one thing that I heard. I don't remember where, and don't take it as gospel. We can assume that maybe your weapon skills has something to do with your ability to hit with that type of weapon, which is always good. There's no way that that's bad for anybody that does any melee. The only classes that might not really take advantage of it would be the rogue and enchanter. Maybe. We don't have enough information on the rogue yet. Maybe they can offhand one.
Or staves. They've got staves, so it's bluntish.
Right, but an enchanter's not going to really melee too much. But it's safe to say that if they have to, for whatever reason, they're going to enjoy that weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, all in all strong, all very fitting for a dwarf. And a little part of me is a bit jealous that they got him. Especially the fortitude one.
What about you, Evo?
Well, actually, I think the if you look at the bonuses, the bonuses they've got, I think actually they've got 3. They've got 2 acclamations and they've got 1 base resistance. So actually, it looks like they're doing very well. The immunity to disarm. There are lots of abilities that require a weapon. So I'm thinking in terms of, for example, the rogue can't backstab without a dagger. It can't make the bleeding attacks without a dagger. The warrior, there's some of its attacks that it can't do without a sword in their hand. Prerequisite. And what else is there? So that's the big one. It occurs to me also a cleric. Cleric, if I remember correctly, is supposed to have a tome that he has all of his information in, which he has to have equipped, I think. If that's the case and he gets disarmed, then presumably he can't do his stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, most clerics we see are using one-handed bashing, and that's the blunt weaponry skill, so it's pretty good for them too. The blunt weapon, I can't see how that's going to work for paladins and warriors necessarily. Possibly. I do think it could work for the rogue if they go the extra mile, because I seem to remember that the rogue has some kind of like a sap attack, or it's I can't remember if it's a stun or if it's a mez type thing.
I think it was a 30-second or 25-second mez.
Well, if that's the case, then presumably this might increase their chance of success. I don't know.
Maybe.
So that would be really useful. The hit points though, that's going to be big.
Yeah.
Really, really big. I mean, if you're building a dwarf and you're going for, a paladin or a warrior, you're going to pump every point into stamina that you've got. You're going to have a monstrously large stamina pool and hit point pool. That's going to make a really big difference. As far as I know, none of those characters burn their own hit points for anything. But if they, if it was one of those kind of classes, then that would be really useful. But as far as I can see, it's just, hit point pool, and that lends itself directly to paladin and warrior. I based on what we see here, we're going to see an awful lot of dwarven paladin.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Before we jump to Josh, I just quickly want to point something out as well, VR. We have a very slim dwarf. Every other game, the dwarves look all the same. They're short as they are wide.
It looks gnomish, actually.
It does. It's gnomish halfling dwarf. But it's very refreshing to see this, that they're not all the same build.
He's wearing
the only thing we're really missing is we need some item in the background to really give us a proper indication of scale. Because I mean the concept art is drawn very, very, very well. Everything is incredibly proportional and just spot on. So when you have a dwarf standing next to a dwarf, I mean, it's hard to determine their actual size.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't a shield. It's actually a dinner plate for a human.
Yeah. It's a sled for a human child.
Isn't there a group picture somewhere of all the races?
There is. I just think that with these, it would have been something nice to have. Not necessarily needed, just nice to have.
I have actually a real life comparison, scaling of each individual race, which I will be putting online in a couple of days. I've still got to quickly finish out the fine details, where you can actually see different sizes and how that would affect a Pantheon. So I can't wait to share that picture with you guys. Anyway, Josh, I'm sidetracking there a bit, bringing some fun and games to everybody. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think everybody's basically summed it up, what they've said. I think that with the dwarves' benefit of the fortitude, they'll definitely be running with buffers all day long, especially it's going to buff their stamina as well. If they're getting the bonuses from that as well, it's going to be definite for them. I think that dwarves are definitely pushed more towards the cleric and paladin with the various passives that they've got, and the warrior obviously, and not so much for the rogue and enchanter. But yeah, I think it's a very solid class, a very very solid race when it comes to its passives.
And I see all of the classes benefiting from the passives that dwarf has. Stamina. Who couldn't be happy with more health, more hit points? And stamina is also going to affect in multiple ways as well. It's like each class has their standard, their core stats, and then the other ones affect them differently and so forth. But all in all, grant immunity to disarm, yes, could be more PvP, but when we look at NPC disposition, behaviors and everything, being disarmed, having a immunity to that, especially if you're a warrior or a paladin or even a cleric, for instance, or let's take the rogue for instance, losing his daggers, he's going to be ineffective, isn't he?
Yeah.
Have absolutely no effect. So having that immunity from being disarmed is going to be beneficial to each of these classes. Not necessarily so much to a cleric. If I lose my weapon, I've still, but hey, what happens if he does steal my tomb? If I'm disarmed and my tomb drops, that's it. I'm done.
Does that mean I can pick it up and be the healer?
No, you can't. Yeah, so it definitely adds. They're all definitely really good, and they actually fit the dwarf. And you know, you pointed out, Evo, as well, a cold resistance. So yes, they might have a immunity, innate bonus to cold resistance, because we do know there's going to be resistances as well. And then we have the acclamations, climax. You know, the frigid, the toxic, anaerobic, wind shear, not wind shear. No, we had earlier on, but yeah, it's. So that definitely does, and having a cold resistance makes sense. These guys are blue. They live in mountains. They
live in like a permanent state of frostbite.
Exactly. Exactly. They're the Coldane. They're the Coldane dwarves that we all liked and never got to play as a race. No. So yeah.
They probably have no toes and fingers left.
Yep, and we have plenty to talk
about. When you've got fortitude passive, you don't need toes or fingers.
We have plenty to talk about though, but we will be doing that at a later date. And yes, we definitely extend an invitation to Evo, and we will definitely be keeping in touch to make sure that we can get him on when we carry on with the other races.
Discussions.
Yep, because there are still 6 more to go, and then obviously.
Chorus minor last.
Huh? Say again.
It's and of course minor last. Sorry, I see how
we could do those next if you want. Next.
I don't care.
If that would make you happy.
No, honestly, it would be better to do the others first.
Okay. So we'll be covering the elves, the gnomes, and the halfling next time we come around. Thank you for joining us, Evo. It was a pleasure having you. And
thanks, Evo.
Evo has a chart that we haven't brought up yet because we don't want to spoil it, but that will be coming towards the end of the when we finish off this series. We have a chart that Evo put up that is very interesting to look at, especially if you're a min-maxer. So look forward to that, and we'll see you all next week. I don't know what next week is yet, but we will see. Maybe we're back next week.
Next week, next week's topic is definitely something to do with Pantheon.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure.
Good.
You know?
Yep.
And I haven't actually told Lex yet, but
oh hell!
When VR stream on the 7th, Lex, you okay? You okay with doing our typical post-stream analysis talk?
On the 7th.
On the 7th.
On the 7th.
I believe it's at noon.
I think it's a Thursday.
Let's see. Okay, so noon PDT. That's 3. So we'll assume it goes an hour. Yeah, I'll be okay.
Good. I'll have to check what time that's going to be for us, Josh, to see if you're even around at that time. I don't know what time that's going to be. And then maybe you can join in on that discussion. I didn't ask because I thought it was a bit later, but we will definitely be doing a post-stream like we normally do when VR stream out the game. So we'll talk about what we see and watch us after you watch VR. So we'll see you all next week, everybody. Have a fun weekend. Again, Evo. Thanks for joining us, Shy.
Thanks
for looking after chat, keeping them engaged. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.